What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's transfer tips ahead of game week 16. So we're going to be looking at some of the heavily transfer players in, out, whether people are making a mistake, who they should be looking at buying instead, that kind of thing. I will say, I'm not talking about Kane and Son in this video. I had planned to, but there's now reports going around that there's been a bit of a COVID outbreak in the first team and some of the coaching staff as well. With these things, like this is what happened last year quite a few times, is you don't tend to find out who the players are until kind of afterwards. So I don't know if it's Kane, I don't know if it's Son, I don't know who it is. I don't want to speculate either because I just don't have the info, right? I'm just going to be honest. So we'll see what happens as we get closer to the deadline. I will probably talk about it on the game week preview. Basically what will happen, right, if the game gets called off, it's just going to be like any other game that gets postponed. It won't count for this game week. Any of the players you've got won't count, and it'll get rearranged later on, a bit like the Spurs versus Burnley game that got called off because of snow, right? It'd be frustrating for Spurs to have to suddenly have a pile up of fixtures later on in the season, but it is what it is. So we'll discuss that as we get more info, and obviously if we don't get any more info, I'll kind of talk about some of the implications as we get closer to the deadline. I just think on Tuesday, when you've still got quite a few days until the deadline, it's probably a little bit too early to do it. But ultimately, because of the fixture run now coming out, you could possibly sell them. But I do think Brighton and Leicester aren't as bad a fixture as they look. So there are probably some reasons why you could keep them. But again, I'm going to discuss that later on in the week. So for transfer tips now, give it a like if you enjoy it. Hit that subscribe button if you're new around here, and let's jump into it. If you want to kind of get an idea of just the sheer number of active FPL managers right now, it's only Tuesday and Bernardo Silva's already been transferred in by 414,000 FPL managers. That's going to keep going up as we get towards the deadline, unless there's any news about an injury or anything like that. But from what we know, there's Champions League matches this week. So these are the final Champions League matches until next year now. And I think that'll be around, I think it's around February when they start back up again. So in terms of rotation, it's only really the league going into the kind of Christmas period. But Bernardo Silva and Cancelo haven't travelled for the Champions League. So you'd assume that's not an injury. They're just finally getting a bit of a rest, which is great for the Premier League. And the thing with Bernardo Silva is, look, I don't want to say I've been a little bit slow to get on board with him, but I do look at underlying stats, and I know always the cat argument is, football. A lot of people are saying it on Twitter right now. Football is played on grass. Don't worry about the stats. You use your eye test, look at form and stuff like that. But it's easy to say that when the player continues, but no one kind of says the opposite when the player doesn't continue to score. Take, for example, Ben Rama at the start of the season, right? Why did his form not continue? Why was the eye test good for 2 game weeks but not for the following game week? So it doesn't always happen, but he is looking great right now. One of the kind of things that people not have against him but are kind of a bit sceptical about whether he can keep this up is so far he's had 7 goals, 1 assist, so 8 returns, which is decent, from, it's 5.5 expected goal involvement. So he is overperforming a little bit. And if you look at the numbers he's got on an individual basis, right, it's 0.4 expected goal involvement per 90, which is okay, right? There's nothing to... It's not awful, but it's not brilliant. Like players like Foden, for example, and Gundogan are much higher. And he doesn't really have stats from last season to kind of back up that he's going to suddenly propel himself to where Foden and Gundogan have been. Like his expected goal involvement last year was 0.28. But he is playing extremely well right now. And one thing we have to take into account with Man City players is their minutes. And right now, Bernardo Silva is playing 90 minutes every single game. So it's all well and good another player having better per 90 stats, but from an FPL point of view, if you're not going to play 90 minutes, it's not that doesn't matter, but you have to put some context around it. So I don't think that Bernardo Silva is that bad of a buy, but would I buy him right now? No, I think for 0.6 million you get Foden, and look, he might play some minutes in the Champions League. Maybe he's a little bit more susceptible about coming off before 90 minutes, like around the 65th, 70th minute sometimes. But when he's on the pitch for the same amount of minutes as Bernardo Silva, I would expect him to score higher than him, right? His underlying stats are better. We've seen him already this season put out some pretty good scores. Obviously, he went then and got injured, which wasn't great. But we have to see that Foden has started. I think he's pretty much started every single game when he's been fit. Obviously, there was some doubts last week about whether he was going to play, and he did. And I think he created like 4 chances in the first 10 minutes. Only came away with an assist, but I think he hit the post as well. So he came very close to scoring. Obviously, on any given game, because it's Man City, because any of their players can score, this can happen, right? Bernardo Silva gets the haul. Foden only comes away with an assist. But on another day, that could be flipped. So I know in some ways a lot of people really don't like Bernardo Silva as an option. I think he's okay. 7.5 million is not out of this world expensive to pay for a Man City midfielder. He looks like he's pretty much playing 90 minutes. He might get a rest at some point, but right now that looks like he's coming in the Champions League. And after this weekend's matches, then the midweek, then another game at the weekend, there's a week break. There's like an 8-day break again. So there's every chance that he plays the next 3 games. So I think he's fine. But if I was buying a Man City midfielder, I would buy Foden. I don't think 414,000 managers are making a mistake, but he's just not the one I would buy. If you're going to buy 2, then you could possibly go for him and Foden, or him plus Gundogan, or Gundogan plus Foden, right? But I think if I was just buying 1, Foden for me still. All right, another £7.5 million midfielder, Mason Mount. And it's kind of unsurprising, right? 144,000 transfer. He had a goal and assist last week, and he also had a goal and assist the week before, right? So people have started taking notice. And to be fair, somebody asked me about Mason Mount in the stream, and I did talk about him a little bit, but I probably wasn't overly positive about him as an option. But I'm probably more so now. Obviously, the Sunday stream was a bit of a knee-jerk stream. I haven't necessarily looked into absolutely everything. And his underlying numbers so far are really good, right? If you look at Bernardo Silva's 0.4 expected goal involvement per 90, Mason Mount's currently on 0.75. So he's performing a lot higher, but we have to, again, put some context around that. His numbers have never been that high, so you'd expect them to come down a little bit. I'm sure over the years he's going to improve, right? He's still very young, but you'd expect them to come down a bit. And obviously he hasn't played as many matches as Bernardo Silva has. That being said, one of the kind of issues I had around him, one of the reasons I didn't necessarily want to buy him, was a minutes thing, because he did have a bit of an injury at one point. He was kind of in the side, then out the side, and then he came back for 61 minutes against Leicester. Then again against Man United, he didn't play, but he has played 2 back-to-back 90s. And I almost feel like he's kind of played himself back into the team. Obviously, Lukaku isn't necessarily starting at the moment, and you've got those kind of 2 number 10 spots behind whoever plays striker. And Havertz has been playing okay. Ziyech has played as well at times, although I don't think Ziyech has necessarily been that great. And I think Mason Mount at times, kind of last season, obviously start of this season, he's almost, I don't want to say untouchable, because I think Tuchel does like to rotate, but he is kind of, he's pretty good, basically, is what I'm trying to say. I think Tuchel at times, especially kind of last season, definitely kind of played him a lot more than he has this season. So I would expect that he's going to keep getting a lot more starts going forward. Whether or not he keeps playing back-to-back 90s, we'll have to see. But I think things are looking good on the expected minutes kind of point of view. The only thing I would say about Chelsea players is the window to buy them is going to get smaller and smaller, right? They've had most of their really good fixtures. They had like a bit of a fixture run that we all knew about. Leeds, the fixtures you see on screen are not that bad, right? Leeds at home's pretty good. Everton at home did well against Arsenal, but I will say if Arsenal were a bit more adventurous, I think they could have got more goals against Everton. Wolves away is difficult-ish. Villa might be difficult-ish under Gerrard. We'll have to wait and see. Brighton at home's okay. So the next 5 are okay. But then they play Liverpool at home, and if I bring up the fixtures, they've then got Man City away, Spurs at home, and 2 blanks. So if you're looking at this fixture, and if you don't buy them for Leeds, then suddenly you've got 4 good fixtures, and then some like a really bad period. And if you get to game week 18 and you still haven't bought the Chelsea player you're looking at, I probably would just ignore them at that point, because Wolves away, like I said, Wolves away, Brighton at home, they're not necessarily teams you'd expect even teams like Chelsea to just go and batter, right? Maybe they will win by a goal or maybe 2 goals, and then you've got that difficult run of fixtures and then 2 blanks. So if you're looking at Mason Mount, I don't think he's an awful option at all, right? And I mean that, right? I don't think he's a bad option. I just don't know if he's where I'd be putting my money right now. You could go and get a Man City midfielder for the same price or a little bit more, got a really good fixture run, no worries about that kind of Liverpool, Man City away, Spurs, 2 blanks section for Man City. You can go and get Foden for a little bit more, you can get Bowen for a little bit less. So I like Mason Mount. I just don't think he'd be at the top of my list for midfielders to bring in right now. I feel like every time we're talking about Jamie Vardy, it's basically me telling people to keep him, and that's probably what I would do this week, although there are some caveats around it, right? So he's been transferred out by 158,000 managers. Obviously, there's going to be some frustration that he didn't start the last game, and then I think with the thing with someone like Jamie Vardy is if he doesn't start, he's almost always going to come on, right? There's going to be the odd time when he just completely misses the game, but especially if they're not running away with it like by 2 or 3 goals, like coming into the 70th, 80th 90th minute, he's always going to come on. They're always going to rely on him to come on and get a goal, right? So that's what happened. But the thing is, the way I'd be looking at it now if I owned him is he's had his rest, right? We know, like Roger spoke about it the other day, that he's not necessarily going to be able to play all these games. They're going to have to manage them. And I think one thing to take away from Jamie Vardy is we always try and call rotation, in that it's always going to be the middle game that they miss out. So if they've got 3 fixtures, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, we always think it's the Wednesday game that players are going to get rotated. Right? I fall into that trap as well. But the way it kind of works, right, I'm not an expert on, medical staff and, how a club is run, but we've heard kind of Klopp talk about it before. It's all about how the player recovers. So if Vardy plays on a Saturday and he's fully recovered to play on Wednesday, they'll probably play him. But if he then, because of 2 matches, he's not fully recovered by the next Saturday game, that's the game they'll rest him. So a lot of players and teams kind of work like that. So it's not always as easy as we think to spot rotation. And obviously, a manager can't then rotate the whole team for the middle game. So some managers will rotate a few players and then in the next game rotate a few other players, right? But Jamie Vardy has had his rest. I don't see any reason why he won't start against Newcastle at home. So it is a good fixture. It's a bit like when people had kept him and then they had Watford at home. And I was like, well, you might as well keep him. It's a really good fixture. And Newcastle at home, again, is one of the best fixtures you can get. They are not very good at stopping the ball going into their net, right? So I really like it. The only caveat is he'll probably fall in price before the deadline. Cristiano Ronaldo will probably go up in price soon as well before the deadline. So if you're looking to make that switch, I don't think it's a bad transfer, because after Newcastle at home, Spurs is pretty difficult. Everton away is not completely easy. Man City, Liverpool are really tough as well. So it is a bad fixture run over a spell of fixtures where he is going to get rested at times as well, maybe miss the odd game over Christmas. So for me, I don't think he's necessarily a bad sell. Like anyone that sold him already, it's not necessarily a bad transfer out. But if you've got other fires to put out, Newcastle at home is a great fixture. There is no reason you couldn't keep him and then do the Ronaldo move the week after if you wanted to. Yes, you miss Ronaldo against Norwich, but Vardy versus Newcastle ain't that bad. So I think Ivan Toney owners can consider themselves a little bit unfortunate that he obviously tested positive for COVID. He's probably... So the current thing is he's going to miss the next 2 games, right? Watford and Man United, which obviously isn't good for him, not good for FPL Managers, not good for Brentford. I don't know what the exact rules are. Like if he tests again and it tests negative, does that mean he can play? I'm not quite sure, because I don't know if we've got all the rules around what's happening in football. We saw that before. Right? You remember, I think it was Son earlier on in the season. It was Son plus one other player. There was a report that they tested positive, but then they tested negative, right? So maybe it was a false positive. I don't know. But as it stands, it looks like he's going to miss Watford at home, Man United at home, unless we hear anything else before the deadline. It probably is worth selling. It's a bit annoying because there aren't a huge amount of players around that price point. I know he's not exactly been fantastic. His underlying numbers, like his goal threat, 0.19 expected goals per 90, isn't really that high for a forward. And it's been like that all season, right? He just hasn't performed to the level that maybe we expected. But there aren't a huge amount of other options at that price. He is going to be nailed when he's fit. And he has got okay fixtures over Christmas plus penalties. Right, okay, Man United at home, Man City at home is not great, but the other fixtures are not that bad. But it probably is worth selling if he's going to miss the next 2. Unless you have... And this is kind of a theme of this season. If you've got a squad where you've been benching like Josh King the last couple of weeks, you could just play him and bench Toney instead. Obviously, it depends how many other bench options you've got, because it's all well and good playing King and benching Toney, but if you've got no other players that can come off your bench, then you are really relying on all 11 other players to start. So it's going to depend on your squad structure. If I was selling him and I didn't have money to go up to maybe Watkins, although Watkins doesn't have great fixture this week against Liverpool, or maybe Jesus, but he's got an injury now, and this is the problem with forwards at the moment, then you're probably looking at Pukki, King, or Wood. I think they probably are the 3 players. Like Morpé's had a couple of back-to-back starts, so you could possibly look at him. Obviously, I think with Southampton strikers, Broja, Armstrong, Adams, they're all in their own right okay options, but the problem is you're just never quite sure which one's going to start. Like, I thought Broja looked really good in the last fixture, but who knows if he's going to start the next one. So that's my main problem with them. Obviously, Hwang's not an option. Saint-Maximin's not a player I'd be buying right now. Benteke and Edouard could rotate. So at least with King and Pukki, you've got nailed-on players that take penalties. Same with Chris Wood. So at that point, it depends how much money you want to spend. King's obviously got a nice fixture this week. He actually plays Brentford. I actually already own King, so I'm quite happy with him. I think with King, you could happily play him for the next kind of 4 fixtures if you needed to. With Pukki, don't completely write him off. I think he looked all right, could have scored against Spurs, had a couple of okay chances. You don't necessarily want to play him against Man United at home, maybe not even against West Ham away. But Villa at home could be okay. Arsenal at home, Crystal Palace away. They're not awful fixtures. But if I was bringing in one of them right now, it would be Josh King. So that's probably where I would go, to be honest. Toney to Josh King, get a couple of good fixtures out of him, a little bit more money to spend. When the fixtures turn for Watford, he can go back to being on your bench, and that's it. But yeah, Toney is someone I think owners would have probably held on to for a little bit longer, maybe up until like game week 20 and got Bamford back in or something like that. But right now, probably, unless we hear anything else that he's going to be okay for Watford, he probably has to go. Rafinha, probably my worst transfer this season, because I sold him for a hit, as we all know, and then I spent the next 4 to 5 weeks telling people not to sell him because he's so great, and he kept returning consistently. So really frustrating. Great if you kept him. A lot of people now looking to move off. 125,000 transfers out already, and obviously the fixtures are really bad, right? You can, you can frame it that Bamford's back and Leeds will do better now, which I think they probably will. But they literally have the 3 worst teams you can face. They're all away over the next 4 game weeks. And Arsenal at home is not necessarily that easy either. But on a normal game week, right, let's say Rafinha had quite a few good fixtures with Arsenal in the middle, there's no way you'd be worried about that Arsenal fixture. So I do think in some cases, maybe if you've got other fires to put out, like no one was probably planning on selling Toney before Watford at home, but if you have to make that move now, it could be worth just keeping Rafinha and maybe even benching him if you have to. So if you bench him for 2 fixtures and got away with it, well, suddenly you can play him against Arsenal at home, you're okay to do that. Maybe you play him or bench him against Liverpool, and then you've got another good run of fixtures. So because of the way squads are set up right now, you probably don't have to rush him out. And I'm not saying to keep him because of value or anything like that. I would just completely ignore that. If you want to get rid of him, get rid of him. But I do think it's only 4 game weeks and then you're going to want him back. There's obviously plenty of points that could be scored over those 4 weeks. Someone like Bowen is definitely a better option for me over the next 4 game weeks. But if you've got a squad where maybe you've got on a lot of players early, your team value is high, you've got really, really good bench options, you can just put Rafinha on the bench and because you've got other priority transfers to make, then I don't think that's a bad idea. I think you can go both ways. Not me trying to sit on the fence. I just think that is the way it is at the moment with the way squads are set out. In a normal season where everyone's playing 3-4-3 or 3-5-2, they've got really bad bench options or really cheap bench options, which you don't really want to play most weeks, then yeah, you'd absolutely sell Rafinha. But right now, a lot of people have squads where that's not the case. In general, his numbers are still looking pretty good. Not quite as good as last year, but decent. Bamford back will help out. It's still going to be difficult over the next 4 fixtures, but in general, Bamford being back is good. I'd happily play him in game week 18. From game week 20, the fixtures are good. I'm going to be looking at buying Rafinha and Bamford if I can from game week 20. So there are definitely options going forward, just not right now. So if you want to sell him, Bowen looks like the best option. Like I said just a minute ago, I don't really know what other £6 million-ish midfielders people would be looking to buy. I wouldn't be looking to buy Gallagher right now. Saka, I still think Saka and Smith-Rowe can do okay over the next few weeks, but watching like Saka against Everton was not that great last night as an owner. And then obviously you're getting into cheaper players, but I just don't think really there's anyone that I would want. So if you can go to Bowen or if you can upgrade him, great. Otherwise, maybe think about holding on to him. There you go. Let me know in the comments below what you think about the players I've spoken about. Like I said, I will talk about Kane, Son and Spurs a little bit later on this week, probably in the game week preview. Hopefully we'll know a little bit more, but I'll talk about whether to kind of buy and sell those players, what my plan is with Kane and all that good stuff as well. If you enjoyed this video, do give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you're new around here, and I will catch you again tomorrow.